Number 14. Henry works at McDonald's because he wants to buy a car. Every time he receives a check, he saves the first $50, then 20% of the rest. Write a function to describe the situation, then find its inverse. All right, so we have equation. Henry earns some money. And I'm just going to say that Henry's money is a function of x. So Henry's money, let's see, every time he receives a check, he saves the first 50%, $50. So out of his total money, he saves $50 and then 20% of the rest. So how would we write this? Let's think, if just for a second, x is the total amount of money, you save $50 of this. So if I went like this would be spending right now everything but $50. Okay, so I'm trying to think through this. So that's spending the first $50. All right, now then 20% of the rest. So this is what's left over when you take away $50. Now, that's what's left over after taking away 50, we save 20% of that. Okay, so 20% is the same thing as 0.2. You divide by 100%. So this means 20% of the rest. And then what would we have to do? We'd have to add that 50 back from the original. So if you take your starting amount, however much he gets paid, you take away 50 from that. That gives you the initial 50 that you save. That gives you what's left over. You multiply that by 0.2 to figure out how much you save from there. There's your equation. So that's your saving equation. That's what you save. Now let's find the inverse. So this would be how much you earned. Okay, so this is, let's say this is saved because this is a function where we get total off the check or what you earned. Okay, so now the inverse, let's first solve it by switching for x and y. So this is now x equals 0.2 y minus 50 plus 50 over here. I'm going to solve for the y. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 50 over. So I'd have x minus 50 equals 0.2, and I'll distribute this, 2y, and then that times 0.2 is minus 10. And you know what? I could have simplified that equation if I wanted to. We'll come back and do that here in a little bit. I'm going to add 10 over. And so I have that x minus 40 equals 0.2y. Last thing, to get y by itself, I divide by 0.2. Divide by 0.2. And so kind of like earlier, whenever you're dividing like that, you can leave it this way, or you could separate it into two fractions. Now I'm going to do that by saying this is now what we earned. So you earned x over 0.2, which is the same thing as x over 0.2. This is kind of like 1/5, is the same thing as 5x, believe it or not. X over 0.2 is congruent to 5 times x. It's the same exact thing. All right, so 5x and then minus 40 divided by 0.2 is going to be the same thing as, I'll do that here, negative 40 over 0.2 is congruent to negative 200. That equation there. This should be my inverse equation. I will check that again here in a second. But first, what I am going to do is I'm going to simplify this over here, and I'm going to say the function for saving is, if I distribute this, I'd have 0.2x. And when you multiply that, you get negative 10. And then plus the 50. I combine those together, I get 40. Positive 40. Okay, let's check and see if these are inverses of one another. So I come over to my graph. And so we say the savings equation is, just to make sure I didn't make any errors, I'm going to start with this equation, 0.2. So we had the $50 we originally made plus 20% of what's left over, which would be x minus 50 is what's left over. There's our first equation. Now we know it's always going to reflect on the line y equals x. So we'll put that in there. And we think we found the equation of the inverse to be 5x minus 200. Now I'm going to zoom out until I can see these graphs. So I'm kind of zooming out. Here they are. Does it look like a perfect reflection? They're looking like it to me. Oh no, just change that one. Okay, let me move this over. No, I want the black over here. Sorry, my calculator's just not cooperating. There we go. Now I want to say, let's add the inverse and see if the calculator says it's the same. So actions, text. Remember, x equals fly. X equals f1 of y. Hit enter. I'm going to hope this covers up the black. And it does, so we did do it correctly.